The abandoned school. I haven't thought about this story in years, not because I wanted to forget it exactly, but because some memories feel sharper when you let them sit quietly in the back of your mind out of reach. Letting them surface, you remember exactly how your chest tightened, how your stomach knotted, how fear tastes metallic in your mouth. And this story, God, this one, is exactly that kind of memory. I grew up in New Jersey, and my friends and I were what you'd call explorers, though it wasn't the kind of exploring that gets you plaques or prizes. We liked abandoned places. Factories, warehouses, broken down houses, the skeletons of buildings left behind when the world moved on. There's a strange beauty in decay, the way paint curls, the way glass catches what light is left, the way silence seems louder than noise. We were obsessed with that silence, almost addicted to it. The abandoned middle school wasn't on the outskirts. It wasn't tucked into a forgotten corner. It sat there, half visible through the chain-link fence, as though daring anyone foolish enough to enter. I won't name it. You don't need to know where it is. If you've ever wandered around North Jersey, you might know the place. Its reputation was legendary online, photographs, stories, graffiti, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. There were 4 of us. Me, Yuri, Frank, and Freddy. I guess I should describe us so you can imagine the dynamic, because it matters. Frank and I were into graffiti, not just the stupid scrawls you see on walls, the kind that barely qualify as letters. We were obsessed with technique, layers, contrast. Yuri was the driver and the cautious one, the guy who always had a plan, or at least pretended to. Freddy was fearless in a way that should have scared the rest of us. If there was danger, he walked toward it like it owed him money. We didn't plan this. It wasn't some weekend ritual or something we had been preparing for. One evening, bored and restless, the idea came up and we just went for it. We drove about 30 minutes out of town, tires crunching on the side streets that led up to the school. The fence had been cut. A simple, cruel slice in the chain link, just big enough for a person to slip through. For a second, I felt a rush of relief. No jumping, no awkward maneuvers. Just a quiet passage into something that was already wrong. Frank led the way, always the first in. Yuri followed, then me and Freddy brought up the rear. The school was massive, bigger than the pictures online suggested. Every hallway stretched into darkness. Every door looked like it could open into a nightmare. The place had been stripped of life in the most clinical way possible. Wires hung from ceilings, tiles crumbled underfoot, and insulation dangled like ghostly cobwebs. I clicked on my flashlight, proud of the beam it threw. Powerful, blinding if you stared directly into it, worth every dollar I spent. The walls were covered in graffiti, some brilliant, some laughable. Frank and I paused here and there, nodding at the better work, silently judging the worst. But the beauty of the school wasn't just in the paint. It was in the decay. The way the stage leaned like it was tired of existing. The way the chairs were stacked or scattered as though the last class had fled mid-lesson. The silence was oppressive, wrapping around us tighter with every step. We made a loop through the basement first, the lowest floor almost daring us to touch it. That was where we found the first pentagram. Massive, painted directly on the concrete. No explanation, just black lines on gray, worn and still sharp despite the years. To someone like me used to exploring, it wasn't shocking. These things pop up. Kids, cults, vandals, whatever. Still, a chill ran up my spine. Freddy laughed nervously. I could feel Frank's unease. Even Yuri, ever cautious, glanced around as though he half expected someone, or something to appear. The second floor was quieter, or maybe our nerves had just started tuning to the wrong frequency. One classroom had a pristine white wall, untouched, perfect. Frank and I couldn't resist. Spray cans in hand, we transformed it in minutes into a chaotic masterpiece, ignoring the feeling in the pit of my stomach that said we were crossing some line we wouldn't return from. Yuri and Freddy disappeared down a dark hallway, hunting for the roof. That's when things started to go wrong. I wandered, flashlight scanning the walls, appreciating the older graffiti. Then out of nowhere, Frank's voice cut through the silence. Angry, accusatory. He accused me of taking his bag. I was stunned. I hadn't moved from the hallway. My words tumbled out, useless, defensive. He muttered something about Freddy, and the 3 of us searched the room. Nothing. The bag was gone. We decided to find the guys on the roof. Every stairwell we tried ended in frustration, in dead ends, in more darkness. Eventually, I found myself in a small side room, flashlight trembling in my hand, and froze. Another pentagram, fresh, still dripping. And there in the corner was Frank's bag. No explanation, no note, just there. He grabbed it, muttering something, his voice loud in the stillness. "What the hell is wrong with him?" I didn't respond. Even Freddy, the fearless one, would have hesitated in a room like that. We left quickly, moving in silence down the hallways, hopping to reconnect with the others. Then came the footsteps, rapid, relentless, echoing through the empty halls. Freddy and Yuri appeared, urging us to follow. No questions, just run. And we did. The school became a maze, twisting, shifting under our panic-stricken minds. Doors that should have led to hallways led to walls. Stairs seemed longer, narrower, darker. Every turn brought more panic, every shadow seemed to move. And then the voice. A deep, calm, almost amused voice that cut through the noise, the chaos, the pounding of our hearts. "I should have cut you when I had the chance." We ran like demons themselves were on our heels. Threats, curses, promises of harm spilled behind us. Somehow, through some miracle of chance or instinct, Yuri found the right turn, the door we had come through, and we burst into the night, lungs burning, ears ringing, hearts pounding like war drums. We didn't stop running until the car was in sight, tires spinning on gravel, and then we were gone. Later, Freddy recounted what had happened while we were separated. They had seen 3 cloaked figures hunched over something on the floor, clinking metal or glass, and when they noticed us, they scattered. I didn't understand it and still don't. Why play with us at all? Why the bag? Why let us see any of it at all? The logic eludes me. We never returned. Even now, years later, I can't explain the sensation of being hunted through that building, being toyed with. Seeing those figures and knowing with every cell in my body that whatever was there was not human, not entirely, and maybe that's what haunts me more than anything. The uncertainty, the sheer randomness, the knowledge that if we had been a second slower, a second less lucky, we wouldn't have made it out. The stranger at the door. After the school, after what happened that night, I thought I'd seen the worst of it. I thought fear had a limit, that panic had a cap. But fear is more elastic than that, stretching farther than your mind is prepared to follow. And I found that out the night I moved into my first home. I had just left a cramped downtown apartment in Spokane. The place was convenient, yes, but life there was suffocating. Noise everywhere, traffic, neighbors, footsteps above, below, beside me. I could hear their breathing if I pressed my ear to the walls, and some nights it felt as if the building itself was holding me hostage, creaking and moaning as I tried to sleep. I wasn't a kid anymore, and I craved quiet. The house I found was small, 1 story on the outskirts of a rural town, tucked behind a stretch of pine trees. A narrow gravel driveway led up to it, winding through shadows that seemed to stretch further than they should in the moonlight. The home itself was modest. 2 small bedrooms, an outdated kitchen, a cramped bathroom, but peaceful. The nearest neighbors were far enough away to be out of sight and sound. I thought I had found sanctuary. It was late October, the kind of night when the chill seeps into your bones and doesn't let go. I had just returned from work, drained in the way only long, mentally exhausting shifts can leave you. I kicked off my boots, changed clothes, and ordered Chinese from the only delivery spot willing to drive out to my place. No apps, no convenience, just a guy who knew the roads. It was just after 10 when the doorbell rang. My first thought was surprise. That fast, I walked to the peephole. A man stood there, hoodie drawn tight, hands shoved into pockets, no food, no bag, nothing that would justify his presence. I froze. There was something wrong, instinct screaming it, but exhaustion slowed my reactions. I cracked the door, chain still on, and asked if he was here for the delivery. He paused, nodded, muttered something about double-checking the order. That's when my brain kicked in fully. This wasn't the delivery guy. I told him to leave. I threatened to call the police. He muttered under his breath and walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the gravel. I stayed frozen for a long moment, staring at the spot he had stood, the hair on my arms raising. I locked the door, dialed the restaurant. Manager confirmed my suspicion. The food hadn't left yet. Someone had come to my house, had stepped onto my porch, and had intended God knows what. I called the non-emergency line, gave them the story. They advised vigilance, nothing more. And though I slept that night, I didn't really sleep. My dreams were a blur of shadows, footsteps, and that hoodie disappearing into the dark. The nights that followed were quiet, deceptively so. I convinced myself the intruder wouldn't return. I convinced myself it had been a random anomaly, a mistake, a fluke. But the universe, as I was learning, enjoys irony. A few nights later, around midnight, sirens ripped me awake. Police, loud, urgent, slicing through the stillness of the night. 3 cruisers flew past my house. I watched from the window, heart racing, but nothing had happened, at least not to me, not directly. I went back to sleep, restless, wary, trying to dismiss it. Not 20 minutes later, a knock at the door. My stomach sank. I approached slowly, checking the peephole. 2 uniformed officers. I opened the door, voice shaky. They showed me a photo, him, the man from the porch. He had been caught trying to break into another house just streets away. They were bringing him in. My pulse slowed for the first time in hours. Relief washed over me, but it was a fragile thing, as if the world had barely remembered to protect me. I stayed in that house for a few more weeks, each creak and groan of the floorboards setting my nerves on edge. The isolation that had once seemed peaceful began to feel like a trap. Every shadow was a figure, every whisper of wind against the windows a voice. And in that space, fear grew, subtle but relentless. It was during this period that I realized fear has a memory. It lingers. It remembers faces, shapes, smells, sounds. And when you least expect it, it drags you back into moments you thought you survived. I never forgot the abandoned school. I never forgot that stranger at the door. But there was a third incident, one that proved fear isn't linear, that it doesn't fade with time. It waits, bides its time, and then strikes when you've least prepared your mind to handle it. It started with a night out, a rare night of freedom. My friend Jackie and I decided to hit a bar in a nearby town, a place we'd been to countless times. I had just finished my first year of law school, living under the pressure and exhaustion that comes with that kind of grind. Sleep was a rare commodity, fun, rarer still. We were scanning the crowd when 2 men approached. Names, Sebastian and Luke, charming, unremarkable, confident. They were the type of men who could blend into any environment without raising suspicion. Jackie clicked with Luke immediately. I stuck with Sebastian. Conversation flowed longer than expected. Laughs, shared stories, subtle teasing. Everything normal, safe. But then I noticed subtle shifts. Their movements, facial expressions, energy. When we returned from the bathroom, they were whispering, silent but deliberate. My stomach turned. Something was off. I played along, swapped drinks subtly, a move that felt both daring and instinctual. That's when the first horrifying confirmation arrived. Within minutes of arriving at Luke's apartment, the 2 men became incapacitated, collapsing into sleep with unnatural speed. My mind raced. Jackie was drunk, oblivious to the danger. I realized with a cold certainty that they had drugged the drinks, that they had intended something. God knows what. Panic, adrenaline, and calculated caution took over. Jackie wanted to investigate, to find evidence. I wanted to leave, to vanish. We compromised. We left. Neither of us went to the police. No proof. Just the visceral memory of powerlessness, of knowing how close the knife of danger had been. As I recount this, it's clear. Fear is not a single event. It is an accumulation. A layering of moments that don't feel significant on their own, but together form a tapestry of terror. Each incident, school, home, bar, built upon the previous, stretching my mind, twisting my instincts, reshaping the way I saw the world. By the time summer ended, I was different. Hyper-aware, suspicious, almost constantly scanning for threats. I realized that horror isn't always a sudden scream or a burst of violence. Often it's subtle, persistent, the quiet invasion of your sense of safety, the slow grinding of normalcy into chaos. And in the quiet hours of the night, I sometimes feel it again. That brush of shadows at the edge of perception, the imagined sound of footsteps where there should be none. The memory of those moments, so visceral, so vivid, that even in the light of day, they make my heart pound. I survived all three events, physically unharmed, but part of me never left those spaces. Part of me is still running through the halls of that abandoned school, still frozen at my back door in the dark, still watching those men in the bar, waiting for me to slip, waiting for me to forget the lessons I learned too late. The shadows that follow. The thing about fear, real, unrelenting fear, is that it doesn't end. It doesn't fade once the threat is gone, once the danger passes. It lingers. It follows you like a shadow, whispering reminders in your mind, filling your dreams with the ghosts of moments you thought you survived. I learned that the hard way, over years after the abandoned school, the stranger at my door, and the near tragedy at the bar. Each incident had left its mark, like faint scars beneath my skin, reminding me that the world isn't as safe as it seems. I had moved yet again, this time trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and my past. I wasn't running in a literal sense, at least I told myself that. But in every decision I sought isolation, quiet, a buffer against the randomness of danger. I ended up in a small apartment on the outskirts of another town, a place that felt almost too ordinary. No trees, no forested driveways, no long gravel paths leading into shadows. Just a simple block of units, neighbors on either side, the hum of electricity and distant traffic. I told myself that normalcy was the antidote to fear, that I could erase the memories by living a life free of shadows. For a few months it seemed to work. I kept to myself, worked long hours, and avoided social situations that might lead to encounters like the one with Sebastian and Luke. But fear, as I had discovered, has a persistence of its own. It waits. It knows your routines, observes your habits, and strikes when you are at your most complacent. Mine arrived in the form of a letter. At first I thought it was a misdelivery. Plain white envelope, no return address, no markings beyond my name typed neatly on the front. I picked it up from the mailbox and examined it. The paper was cheap, the envelope slightly rough. Something about it set my teeth on edge. A gut feeling, cold and persistent. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words scrawled in a jagged hand. You can run, you can hide, but we are always closer than you think. No signature, no indication of who we were. My chest tightened. My palms were slick. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Every memory, school, home, bar, rushed back, flooding me with adrenaline. I checked the apartment, doors locked, windows closed. Nothing. No one. And yet I felt eyes on me, a presence in the corner of my vision that wasn't really there. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every creak, every whisper of the wind against the walls set my nerves on fire. I paced the apartment, checked the locks repeatedly, peered out the windows, convinced that someone had to be there. Hours passed. Morning came. The letter remained on the kitchen table, untouched. Over the next week, small things began to happen. Things that could be explained logically but weren't. Shadows at the edge of vision. Flickering lights that didn't correspond to any electrical issue. My phone buzzing with unknown numbers that displayed no caller ID. Each time, my heart would leap, my mind spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Then came the footsteps, always at night. Slow at first, barely audible, heavy, methodical, like someone walking across my apartment above or beside me, but no one lived there. No one should have been there. I tried rationalizing, telling myself it was plumbing, settling floors, neighbors walking above. But the sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic, too human. I installed cameras, checked entry points, set alarms. Nothing. No evidence. And yet the footsteps continued. Always at night, always deliberate, moving through spaces where no one could possibly be. My friends and family suggested stress, paranoia, exhaustion. I told myself the same thing, yet every night fear clawed at me, deeper than before, a presence I could neither see nor fight. It wasn't long before the dreams began. The kind of dreams that leave your body cold and stiff, your mind screaming as if your body were trapped, shadows moving in impossible patterns, faces obscured but somehow familiar, voices whispering threats just beyond comprehension. Each morning I woke drenched in sweat, shaking, unable to speak for minutes, and in the hours between sleep I could feel it, those eyes, watching, waiting. I began carrying a knife. At first it was a small kitchen knife, then a larger one. I moved furniture to block doors, installed extra locks, double-checked every latch, but it never mattered because the terror wasn't physical. It wasn't about someone entering my apartment. It was about the anticipation. The certainty that whatever had been chasing me in those years past had found me again, not in body but in mind. The culmination came one night in late November. I had stayed up late, obsessively scanning every corner of my apartment, lights on, every door locked, windows checked. Around 2:30 a.m. I heard it, the scraping, not footsteps, something slower, deliberate, like metal dragged across wood. My breath caught, every muscle tensed. I grabbed the largest knife I owned and moved toward the sound. It came from the bedroom, my room. I froze at the doorway. Shadows flickered against the walls, bending unnaturally as if the room itself were alive. Then a voice, low, guttural, distant, yet impossibly near, whispered my name, not once but over and over. "You cannot hide, you cannot escape." I lunged, screaming, but the room was empty. Knife in hand, sweat blinding my vision, I spun, tried to see anything, anyone. Nothing. Only shadows, twisting, writhing as if mocking me. The letter, the footsteps, the intruder at the door, the abandoned school, the bar. All threads of the same tapestry, weaving together into something I could not confront, could not outrun. I slept finally at dawn. Exhaustion overpowered fear, but it was a fragile truce. In daylight the shadows receded, footsteps vanished. Reality seemed solid, reliable, but night always returned. Fear, persistent, inevitable, like a tide that will not retreat. I realized then that the horror of life isn't always in the act itself, the intruder, the cult, the drugged drinks, but in the aftermath, in the way it changes you, reshapes your instincts, poisons your nights, and whispers that the world is not safe. It's in the terror of knowing that no lock, no door, no wall can protect you from the memory of what has happened, nor from what might happen next. I don't know who sent that letter, or if the footsteps will return. I don't know if the men in the bar were ever acting alone, or if someone has been watching me all this time. But I do know this: the fear is real. It lives. It waits. And sometimes, just sometimes, it speaks to you, reminding you that the past never truly dies, that the shadows always follow, and that safety is nothing more than an illusion you cling to until it's ripped away. I've learned to live with it, in the quiet, in the daylight, in the normal. I've learned that horror is not always in the scream, but in the silence between them. In the pause before footsteps, the empty glance out a window, the letter on the table. It is in knowing that the world can be normal, peaceful, even beautiful, and yet just beneath, something is always waiting. And that, more than anything else, is the most terrifying thing of all.